A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. Some Pharisees and Herodians were sent to Jesus to ensnare him in his speech. They came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man and that you are not concerned about anyone's opinion. You do not regard a person's status, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or should we not pay?" Knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius and look at it." They brought him one, and he said to them, "Whose image and inscription is this?" They replied to him, "Caesar's." So Jesus said to them, "Repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." They were utterly amazed at him. The more uncertain the times, the more perplexing the choices. Growing up, I felt rather secure. Decades ago, as a child, our world seemed so much less complicated than it is today. Growing up, my parents and the good sisters who taught us in grade school, as well as organizations like the Boy Scouts of America or the Knights of Columbus, to which my father belonged, all taught us a very useful axiom: God and country. It was useful because it clearly provided a balance. It helped me to know where and to whom I owed my allegiance. My father, who served in the Pacific during World War II, and his father before him, who served in World War I, fighting in France, had in their lives both been quick to answer the call to arms out of love for their nation. When the Vietnam War was beginning, the good sisters who taught us had us write letters to the soldiers serving there, and they, the sisters, emphasized that those men were defending God and country from the spread and threat of communism. So writing those letters still felt good and seemed to be the right thing to do. After all, God and nation were in peril, and both needing to be defended. At least that's how we saw it then. Mind you, I was still only in grade school or middle school at the time. Later, when I was in high school, the Vietnam War continued to rage, but the tide of public support for it clearly had turned. You know the history as well as I do. I still remember Teddy, a young man from our neighborhood, sitting on our front porch talking to my father about whether he should serve or hitchhike the next day across the border to Canada. Well, you probably can guess what side my father came down on, the side of country and patriotism. But Teddy wasn't so sure that serving was what God might have been asking of him in that moment. To my young ears, that conversation, which I listened to as an adolescent there on the front porch, was a turning point. I recognized even then that axiom of God and country no longer felt quite as secure and certain. While we revere one God and we respect the other country, they are not and were not then synonymous. To one God, we owe everything. To the other, we owe what is just and proportionate. Determining the latter is sometimes difficult and becomes grist for political debate and discussion in any and every age and place. But the author and sustainer of life, God, to him we owe an incalculable debt, our very souls and ourselves. We may hesitate to pay taxes, but giving God what is God's due should be something that we do right now and always. After all, it is an act of love, and eternity weighs heavy in any scale. These days, tragically, I am called to remember that time again when I was a child and adolescent. I remember these days, tragically, July 1967, when something very similar happened, similar to what happened to George Floyd, caused Newark, a city not too far from where I lived, about 15 minutes, to be engulfed in flames, and 23 people, 21 African Americans and 2 whites, were killed in just 3 days during those riots in Newark. I watched, perplexed, worried, and concerned. I watched on television and tried to understand what was happening. Now, so many years later, it is disturbing that we seem to be back at that place. Maybe we never left it. I am no longer a child or an adolescent. I am a man, a priest, and even a fourth-degree knight, as my father before me was. The knights, fourth-degree knights, are pledged to God and country. But we must admit, as we look around our world at this moment, that it is absolutely true that what our nation gives to some, it does not give to all. It may seem naive. I know there are no easy answers. But if we would all give to God everything that is His due, then maybe we would all be less on the brink and more on the path to healing and to what is right, noble, just, and true. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. Amen.